The Galactic Empire's mockery of alien princesses marrying primitive humans reached a fever pitch as Emperor Zorn the Magnificent issued his latest proclamation. His holographic image, projected across countless worlds, sneered at the union between Craig Richardson, a human diplomat, and Prylor, Princess of the Kazon Empire. These unions are an affront to galactic order and a threat to the genetic purity of advanced species, Zorn declared, his tentacles writhing with disgust. Humans are barely out of their Stone Age. Their presence in our civilized society is tolerated, but to allow them to pollute our bloodlines? Unthinkable. Craig Richardson watched the broadcast from his quarters on Centauri Prime, jaw clenched. He'd known his marriage to Prylor would ruffle feathers, but he hadn't anticipated this level of vitriol. What had started as a political maneuver to improve human-Kazon relations had snowballed into a galactic controversy. His comm unit chimed. It was a message from Earth's Central Command. Craig's stomach tightened as he read the orders. He was to be the new human ambassador to the Galactic Empire. His mission? Prove that humans weren't the primitives the Empire believed them to be. As Craig processed this information, another message arrived. This one from the Kazon Empire, threatening to sever all ties with Earth unless his marriage to Prylor was annulled. The pressure of interstellar politics weighed heavily on his shoulders. Craig's mind raced. How could he navigate these treacherous diplomatic waters? And what of the rumors he'd heard about a secret Galactic Empire research facility where captured humans were being studied to determine the source of their perceived inferiority? His musings were interrupted by Prylor's entrance. Her iridescent scales shimmered as she moved, a reminder of the vast differences between their species. Yet when their eyes met, Craig felt the same connection that had drawn them together. "I heard the news," Prylor said, her voice a mix of concern and determination. "What will you do?" Before Craig could answer, Prylor stumbled, clutching her abdomen. In that moment, a realization struck them both. Prylor was pregnant. The implications were staggering. This could be the first human-Kazon hybrid in recorded history, a child that would become a lightning rod for controversy, desired by scientists for study and reviled by zealots as an abomination. As the reality of their situation sank in, Craig knew his mission had just become infinitely more complex. He had to protect Prylor and their unborn child, infiltrate the Empire's secret research facility, and somehow prove humanity's worth to a galaxy that seemed determined to reject them. The Galactic Empire's propaganda machine kicked into overdrive, using Craig and Prylor's relationship as a prime example of the dangers of interspecies breeding. Discrimination against humans intensified throughout the Empire, making Craig's diplomatic mission seem almost impossible. Yet as he held Prylor close, feeling the first stirrings of their child within her, Craig Richardson knew he couldn't back down. The future of human-alien relations hung in the balance, and he was at the center of it all. With a deep breath, Craig began to plan. He would need all his diplomatic skills, and perhaps a bit of human ingenuity, to navigate the challenges ahead. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test his abilities, challenge the Empire's prejudices, and potentially reshape the future of galactic society. Little did the Galactic Empire know, their mockery of the primitive human was about to backfire spectacularly. Craig's plans for navigating the complex diplomatic waters were abruptly derailed as news of Prylor's pregnancy spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Within days, the Galactic Empire's response was swift and severe. Emperor Zorn's holographic image once again dominated the airwaves, his tentacles writhing with even greater agitation than before. "This abomination cannot be allowed to exist," he declared, mandibles clicking in disgust. "We must take immediate action to study and contain this threat to our genetic purity." As Craig watched the broadcast, his comm unit chimed incessantly with incoming messages. Reports of increased discrimination against humans flooded in from across Imperial space. He scrolled through them with growing concern, noting a disturbing pattern of disappearances among human-alien couples. A high-priority encrypted message from Admiral Jackson, head of Earth's intelligence agency, caught his attention. The Admiral's weathered face appeared on the screen, lines of worry etched deep. "Richardson, we've got a situation. Human disappearances are spiking throughout the Empire. We have reason to believe they're connected to a secret Imperial research facility, Watch your back." Before Craig could fully process this information, Prylar entered their quarters, her scales shimmering with an anxious energy. "Craig, my brother is coming," she said, her voice tight with worry. "The Kazon Empire is demanding I return home and annul our marriage." Craig's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. He needed to protect Prylar and their unborn child, investigate these disappearances, and somehow salvage his diplomatic mission. It was an impossible task, but he had no choice but to try. As tensions escalated, Craig found an unexpected ally in Captain Marcus Steele of the merchant vessel Star Drifter. An old friend from his academy days, Steele offered to help Craig reach the Omega Nebula, where intelligence suggested the Empire's secret facility was located. Their plans were interrupted by the arrival of Prince Khazar, Prylar's brother. The Kazon royals strode into their quarters unannounced, flanked by a contingent of guards. "Sister, you will return home with me at once," Khazar demanded, his scales flushing deep crimson with anger. "This union is dissolved." Craig stepped between them. "Your Highness, with all due respect, Prylar is my wife. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to." The tension in the room was palpable as Human and Kazan locked eyes. Prylar placed a hand on Craig's arm, her touch calming him even as her brother's guards reached for their weapons. The standoff was broken by the sudden blaring of alarms throughout the diplomatic quarter. Craig's comm unit lit up with urgent messages. Imperial forces were on their way. "We need to leave now," Craig said, grabbing Prylar's hand and pushing past her stunned brother. They raced through the corridors of the diplomatic complex, alarms blaring around them. Craig's mind whirled with the implications. How had the Empire moved so quickly? Who had betrayed their location? As they neared the spaceport where the Star Drifter waited, a squad of Imperial Special Forces materialized in front of them, led by a towering Draconian. Commander Vex, Craig realized with a chill. The Empire had sent their best. "Craig Richardson," Vex's voice rumbled, "surrender the Kazon female and submit yourself for genetic evaluation." Craig's eyes darted around, looking for an escape route. He spotted a maintenance hatch to their left. Without hesitation, he shoved Prylar towards it. "Run!" he shouted, turning to face the Imperial forces. Using every trick he'd learned in diplomatic corps training, Craig managed to hold off the first wave of soldiers. His diplomatic immunity provided some protection, forcing Vex to be cautious in his approach. But it wasn't enough. As Craig turned to follow Prylar, he saw her being dragged into an Imperial shuttle. Their eyes met for a brief, agonizing moment before the shuttle's doors slammed shut. Craig sprinted towards the taking-off shuttle, his heart pounding. He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not like this. With a desperate leap, he managed to grab onto the shuttle's landing gear just as it lifted off. The wind whipped around him as the shuttle broke atmosphere, Centauri Prime shrinking rapidly below. Craig clung to the landing gear, his muscles screaming with the effort. He had no plan, no weapons, and no idea what awaited him aboard the Empire's secret facility. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would find Prylar, and he would uncover the truth behind the Empire's sinister interest in human-alien reproduction. As the stars streaked by, Craig steeled himself for what lay ahead. The shuttle banked, setting a course for the Omega Nebula in the heart of the Empire's Project Genesis. The shuttle's sudden lurch into hyperspace nearly tore Craig from his precarious perch on the landing gear. His muscles screamed as gravitational forces beyond human comprehension threatened to rip him apart. Gritting his teeth, he clung on with everything he had, his mind focused solely on Prylar and their unborn child. As the shuttle emerged from hyperspace, Craig's vision swam. The Omega Nebula stretched before him, a swirling mass of cosmic dust and newborn stars. In the center of this celestial maelstrom loomed a massive space station, its sleek lines betraying its imperial origin. The shuttle began its docking sequence, and Craig seized his chance. As the vessel slowed, he released his death grip on the landing gear and dropped to the hangar floor. His legs buckled beneath him, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Ducking behind a stack of cargo crates, he watched as Imperial troops escorted the still unconscious Prylar from the shuttle. Craig's heart raced as he formulated a plan. He needed to find Prylar and escape, but he was on an enemy station with no weapons, no allies, and no idea where to go. As the hangar emptied, he spotted a maintenance hatch and made his move. The station's innards were a maze of cramped tunnels and air ducts. Craig crawled through them, relying on his smaller human frame to navigate spaces designed for the station's automated cleaning drones. The hum of machinery filled his ears as he searched for any clue to Pryler's whereabouts. After what felt like hours of searching, Craig found himself above a research lab. Through the ventilation grate, he could see a group of aliens gathered around a holographic display. Their leader, a tall, spindly creature with multifaceted eyes, gestured excitedly as he spoke. "Colleagues, our initial tests on the human Kazon hybrid fetus have yielded extraordinary results," the alien said, his voice filled with barely suppressed excitement. "The genetic stability is unprecedented. It seems these humans possess a unique adaptability we never anticipated." Craig's breath caught in his throat. They were talking about his child. The alien continued, "I believe we've only scratched the surface of human genetic potential. We must expand our experiments immediately. Prepare the serum for the next phase of testing. We'll begin artificial insemination trials using genetic material from various species." As the scientists dispersed, Craig committed the alien's face to memory. This must be Dr. Zarlox, the lead researcher of Project Genesis. The implications of what he'd overheard were staggering, but Craig pushed them aside. He needed to focus on finding Pryler. Following the scientists, Craig navigated through the ventilation system until he found himself above a medical bay. His heart leapt as he spotted Pryler lying on an examination table, surrounded by beeping monitors and IV drips. Craig was about to make his move when the door slid open. A female alien with iridescent skin and large almond-shaped eyes entered, checking a data pad as she approached Pryler. Craig held his breath, watching as the alien adjusted the medical equipment. Suddenly, the alien froze, her eyes darting to the ventilation grate. "Who's there?" she called out, her hand hovering over an alarm panel. Craig knew he had no choice. He kicked out the grate and dropped into the room, hands raised. "Please," he said, "I'm not here to hurt anyone. That's my wife." The alien's eyes widened in recognition. "You're the human," she said. "Craig Richardson." Craig nodded, tensing for a fight. But to his surprise, the alien's expression softened. "I'm Dr. Lilia," she said. I've been questioning the ethics of this project. What we're doing here, it's not right." Hope surged through Craig. "Then help us," he pleaded. "Help me get her out of here." Dr. Lilia hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'll do what I can," she said, moving to disconnect Pryler from the medical equipment. As Craig lifted Pryler into his arms, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Dr. Lilia paled. "They've discovered you're here," she said. "We need to move quickly." The trio raced through the corridors, Dr. Lilia using her access codes to bypass security checkpoints. As they ran, she filled Craig in on the station's layout and the quickest route to the hangar bay. They were passing through a dimly lit laboratory when Craig stopped short. The room was filled with rows of stasis pods, each containing a human male floating in a greenish liquid. Craig's stomach churned as he realized the full scope of the Empire's experiments. "We can't leave them," he said, looking at Dr. Lilia. Before she could respond, the sound of boots echoed down the corridor. Commander Vex's voice boomed over the station's comm system. "Attention, all personnel. The human intruder has been located in Section 7. Apprehend him at all costs, but do not harm the Kazan female." Craig and Dr. Lilia shared a look of panic. They were running out of time. As they neared the hangar bay, a squad of Imperial soldiers rounded the corner, led by the imposing figure of Commander Vex. Craig's heart sank as he realized they were trapped. Vex's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "Richardson," he growled, "surrender now, and I may show mercy to your Arcturian accomplice." Craig gently set Pryler down, positioning himself between her and the Imperial forces. His mind raced, searching for a way out of this impossible situation. Suddenly, the station shook violently. The lights flickered as explosions rocked the structure. Through the viewport behind Vex, Craig saw a fleet of ships dropping out of hyperspace, weapons blazing. In the chaos that followed, Craig made his move. He lunged forward, catching Vex off guard with a swift uppercut. The Draconian staggered back, more surprised than hurt. Craig seized a fallen soldier's weapon, tossing another to Dr. Lilia. "Cover me!" he shouted, scooping up Prylar once more. To Craig's astonishment, Dr. Lilia handled the weapon with practiced ease, laying down suppressing fire as they retreated towards the hangar bay. Alarms blared and personnel ran in all directions, trying to respond to both the internal and external threats. As they reached the hangar, Craig's eyes locked onto a sleek Imperial shuttle. Freedom was within reach, but the weight of what he'd seen in the laboratory pulled at him. He turned to Dr. Lilia, conflict evident in his eyes. "The other humans," he said, "we can't just leave them." Dr. Lilia nodded, understanding the gravity of his decision. "Whatever you choose," she said, "we need to decide quickly." Craig looked down at Prylar's unconscious form, then back at the corridor leading to the labs. The fate of not just his family, but potentially all of humanity, rested on what he did next. Craig's gaze darted between Prylar's unconscious form and the corridor leading back to the labs. The weight of his discovery pressed down on him, but the urgency of their situation demanded action. "Dr. Lilia," he said, his voice tight with drive, "I need you to take Prylar to that shuttle." He pointed to a sleek, compact vessel nestled in the corner of the hangar. "Prepare for immediate launch. I'm going back for the others." The Arcturian's eyes widened. "But the alarms—" "I know," Craig cut her off, "but I can't leave them behind. Not now that I know." Dr. Lilia nodded, understanding etched across her features. She lifted Prylar with surprising strength and moved swiftly toward the indicated shuttle. Craig sprinted back through the chaos-filled corridors, his heart pounding in time with the blaring alarms. He skidded to a stop outside the lab, the door sliding open with a hiss. The rows of stasis pods greeted him, each containing a floating human form. Craig's fingers flew over the control panel, initiating the release sequence for all pods simultaneously. As the greenish liquid drained and the pod covers lifted, Craig moved down the line, helping disoriented men to their feet. "Listen up," he called out, his voice carrying over the confused murmurs. "We're getting out of here. Follow the red emergency lights to the hangar bay. There are ships waiting." One by one, the men stumbled out, supporting each other as they made their way toward freedom. Craig turned his attention to the lab's computer systems, plugging in a data device and initiating a rapid download of files. The station shuddered violently, nearly knocking Craig off his feet. Through the viewport, he caught glimpses of a furious space battle. A familiar ship, the Star Drifter, led the charge against the station's defenses. As the last of the data transferred, Craig's eyes fell on a hidden door at the back of the lab. Curiosity warred with urgency as he approached, keying in his override code. The door slid open, revealing a smaller, more advanced laboratory. Craig's breath caught in his throat as he took in the rows of stasis pods, each containing a tiny form, hybrid fetuses at various stages of development. His hands shook as he documented the room with his data device, capturing every detail of this gruesome discovery. With a grim set to his jaw, Craig activated the lab's self-destruct sequence, ensuring no further experiments could be conducted here. Alarms changed pitch, warning of the impending destruction. Craig sprinted from the lab, catching up with the last group of freed test subjects. They moved as quickly as they could through the station's winding corridors, the sounds of battle growing louder with each step. As they rounded a corner, Craig came face to face with a squad of Imperial soldiers led by Commander Vex. The Draconian's eyes blazed with fury. "Richardson!" Vex roared, raising his weapon. Craig didn't hesitate. He dove forward, tackling Vex around the midsection. The two went down in a tangle of limbs, Craig's smaller human frame allowing him to slip from the alien's grasp. "Run!" Craig shouted to the test subjects, who had frozen in fear. His words galvanized them into action, and they surged forward, overwhelming the surprised Imperial soldiers with sheer numbers. Craig scrambled to his feet, narrowly avoiding Vex's clawed swipe. He snatched up a fallen soldier's weapon and fired a burst of energy bolts, forcing the Imperials to take cover. Inspiration struck as Craig remembered his diplomatic corps training. "Commander Vex," he called out, adopting a formal tone, "in accordance with Galactic Treaty 27B, I invoke the right of safe passage for these civilians." The invocation of galactic law gave Vex pause, his training warring with his orders. It was all the opening Craig needed. He fired again, collapsing part of the ceiling between them, and sprinted after the fleeing test subjects. They burst into the hangar bay amid a scene of controlled chaos. Several small ships from the Galactic Unity front had breached the defenses and were loading up the freed humans. Craig spotted Dr. Lilia waving frantically from the shuttle's hatch. "Go!" Craig shouted to the remaining test subjects, urging them toward the waiting ships. He ran to join Dr. Lilia, diving into the shuttle as energy bolts sizzled past. "Prylar," he gasped, scanning the shuttle's interior. "Secure," Dr. Lilia replied, her fingers dancing over the control panel. "But we've got company." Through the view screen, Craig saw Commander Vex leading a fresh squad of troops into the hangar. The Draconian's eyes locked onto their shuttle, and he charged forward with a roar of outrage. Craig slammed his hand down on the launch control. The shuttle's engines flared to life, lifting them off the deck just as Vex reached for the landing strut. "Hold on!" Craig yelled, taking the controls. He gunned the engines, sending them hurtling out of the hangar bay and into the swirling melee of the space battle. The comm unit crackled to life. "Craig," Captain Steele's voice rang out. "Glad to see you made it. We've detected a massive Imperial fleet inbound. We need to move, now." Craig's mind raced as he weaved through the debris field, Imperial fighters in hot pursuit. The fate of the freed test subjects, the stolen data, and most importantly, Prylar and their unborn child, all rested on his next decision. "Marcus," Craig replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We need a rendezvous point, somewhere off the main hyperlanes where we can regroup and plan our next move." As Captain Steele relayed coordinates, Craig caught sight of a small escape pod launching from the disintegrating station. Something about its trajectory nagged at him, but there was no time to dwell on it. With a final burst of speed, the shuttle cleared the battlefield. Craig punched in the coordinates, and the stars stretched into streaks of light as they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the chaos of the Omega Nebula behind. As the adrenaline began to ebb, Craig turned to check on Prylar. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his with a mix of confusion and relief. He took her hand, squeezing gently. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're safe for now." But even as the words left his mouth, Craig knew their ordeal was not nearly finished. With the Empire in pursuit, a group of traumatized test subjects under their protection, and galaxy-shaking revelations in their possession, the real challenges were just beginning. The real challenges were just starting to unfold. As their shuttle hurtled through hyperspace, Craig felt the tension in his muscles slowly uncoil. He glanced at Dr. Lilia, who was monitoring Prylar's vital signs on a small handheld device. "How is she?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Lilia looked up, her large eyes blinking slowly. "Stable, but we need to get her proper medical attention soon." Craig nodded, turning his attention back to the shuttle's controls. The comm unit crackled to life, Captain Steele's voice filling the cabin. "Craig, we're approaching the exit point. Prepare for re-entry to normal space." With practiced ease, Craig disengaged the hyperdrive. The star lines collapsed into pinpricks of light, revealing a vast expanse of space unlike anything he'd seen before. Dense fields of asteroids stretched as far as the eye could see, punctuated by swirling clouds of cosmic dust that pulsed with strange energies. "Welcome to the Zeta Expanse," Captain Steele's voice came through again. "Follow my lead closely. It's easy to get lost in here." Craig maneuvered the shuttle carefully, keeping the Star Drifter in sight as they wove through the treacherous asteroid field. Prylar stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open. "Craig," she murmured, disoriented, "where are we?" He reached out, taking her hand. "We're safe. We're with friends." As they navigated the celestial obstacle course, a massive gas giant loomed into view. Orbiting it was a small, nondescript moon that seemed unremarkable at first glance. But as they drew closer, Craig saw the telltale signs of a hidden base: concealed hangar bays, camouflage sensor arrays, and the faint shimmer of a cloaking field. The Star Drifter transmitted landing codes, and a section of the moon's surface seemed to ripple and part, revealing a vast underground hangar. Craig guided the shuttle in, setting it down gently beside the other ships carrying the rescued test subjects. As the engines powered down, the shuttle's hatch hissed open. A team of medical personnel rushed in, led by a human woman with short-cropped silver hair and piercing green eyes. "I'm Dr. Kira Ward," she announced, her gaze sweeping over the occupants of the shuttle. "Let's get you all to the medical bay for examination." Craig helped Pryler to her feet, supporting her as they made their way out of the shuttle. The hangar was a hive of activity, with resistance members unloading supplies and tending to the needs of the newly arrived refugees. Dr. Ward led them through a series of winding corridors, the walls a uniform gray that spoke of functionality over aesthetics. They arrived at a state-of-the-art medical facility where Pryler was quickly whisked away for a more thorough examination. "Mr. Richardson," Dr. Ward addressed Craig, her tone professional but kind, "I'd like to examine you as well. Your exposure to the Empire's experiments may have had unforeseen effects." Craig nodded, allowing himself to be led to an examination room. As Dr. Ward ran her scans, he couldn't help but notice the advanced nature of the equipment. It was clear that the Galactic Unity Front had significant resources at its disposal. "Fascinating," Dr. Ward muttered, her eyes fixed on a holographic display of Craig's genetic structure. "There are subtle changes here. Nothing like what we're seeing in the other test subjects, but definitely something to monitor." Before Craig could ask for clarification, the door slid open, revealing a tall, battle-scarred alien with 4 arms and iridescent scales. Despite his intimidating appearance, his eyes held a warmth that immediately put Craig at ease. "Admiral Zoran," Dr. Ward acknowledged with a nod. "I was just finishing up with Mr. Richardson." The Admiral stepped forward, extending one of his 4 hands. "Craig Richardson," he rumbled, his voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Your actions today have struck a significant blow against the Empire. We have much to discuss." Craig shook the offered hand, feeling the strength in the alien's grip. "Admiral, I'm just glad we made it out. But there's so much more at stake here. The things I saw in that lab." Admiral Zoran's expression darkened. "Indeed, we've received the data you transmitted. Our analysts are going through it now, but what we've seen so far is troubling, to say the least." A young human officer burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement and fear. "Admiral, we've just received an urgent transmission from our operative within the Empire. You need to see this immediately." The Admiral's scales rippled, a sign Craig interpreted as concern. "Very well, Mr. Richardson. If you're up for it, I'd like you to join us. Your insights could be valuable." Craig nodded, sliding off the examination table. He turned to Dr. Ward. "Pryler is in good hands," the doctor assured him. "I'll personally oversee her care. Go. This sounds important." Craig followed Admiral Zoran and the young officer through the base's corridors, eventually arriving at a high-security command center. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing tactical readouts, communication logs, and a real-time map of known Imperial fleet movements. A heavily encrypted transmission began to play, the voice distorted but the message clear. Emperor Zorn was out for blood. The destruction of Project Genesis had sent him into a rage, and he had ordered a galaxy-wide manhunt for Craig and the escaped test subjects. But it was the mention of Project Chimera that sent a chill down Craig's spine. The Empire was doubling down on its efforts to create human-alien hybrids, this time with even less regard for ethics or consent. As the transmission ended, the room erupted into a flurry of activity. Officers relayed orders, analysts pored over data, and Admiral Zoran turned to Craig with a grim expression. "Mr. Richardson," he said, his voice low and serious, "it seems your ordeal is nowhere near the end. The Empire's obsession with human genetics has reached a new level of danger. We need to formulate a response, and quickly." Craig's mind raced, processing the implications of what he'd just heard. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, heavier than ever before. As he looked around the command center, seeing the purpose in the eyes of the resistance members, he knew that the real battle was only just beginning. "Admiral," Craig said, straightening his posture, "what do you need from me?" Admiral Zoran's scales rippled again, this time in what Craig recognized as approval. "First, we need everything you know about Project Genesis and this new Project Chimera. Then we need to discuss our next move. The fate of multiple species may well rest on what we do in the coming days. Craig nodded, his mind focused. As he prepared to brief the resistance leaders, he couldn't help but think of Prylar and their unborn child. Whatever came next, he knew he was fighting for more than just himself now. He was fighting for the future of human-alien relations across the galaxy. The weight of this responsibility settled heavily on Craig's shoulders as he followed Admiral Zoran to a secure briefing room. Hours passed as Craig shared every detail he could remember about Project Genesis in the Imperial facility. Analysts pored over the data, cross-referencing it with their own intelligence. As the debriefing wound down, Dr. Ward entered the room, her face a mask of professional concern. "Admiral, Mr. Richardson," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I need you to come with me immediately." They followed her through the winding corridors of the base to the medical bay. Inside, Prylar sat on an examination table, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Dr. Lilia stood beside her, adjusting a holographic display that showed a detailed image of the fetus. "What's going on?" Craig asked, moving quickly to Prylar's side. Dr. Ward gestured to the hologram. "The fetus is developing at an unprecedented rate. We're seeing genetic markers and physiological changes that are, well, extraordinary." Admiral Zoran leaned in, his scales shifting colors as he studied the display. "Explain." "The child appears to be inheriting the best traits from both parents," Dr. Lilia interjected. "Human adaptability combined with advanced alien physiological enhancements. The cognitive potential alone is off the charts." Craig's mind reeled as he processed the information. He turned to Prylar, who squeezed his hand reassuringly. "What does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Zoran's expression turned thoughtful. "It means we may have stumbled upon something far more significant than we realized." He paced the room, his forearms clasped behind his back. This could change everything. Over the next few days, Craig and Prylar found themselves at the center of intense discussions and ethical debates. Admiral Zoran proposed a controversial plan, Operation Starbirth, a carefully controlled breeding program to create a new generation of human-alien hybrids. "It's not about creating super soldiers," Zoran explained during a heated meeting with resistance leaders. "It's about fostering a generation that can bridge the gap between species, adapt to any environment, and potentially bring peace to the galaxy." Craig voiced his concerns. "But at what cost? We can't force people into this." "Of course not," Zoran agreed. "Participation would be entirely voluntary, with full transparency about the implications and purpose." After long deliberations and consultations with Dr. Ward and Dr. Lilia, Craig and Prylar made their decision. They would participate in Operation Starbirth, hoping their example might inspire others and pave the way for a new era of interspecies cooperation. As word spread through the resistance, other couples came forward, intrigued by the possibility. The hidden moon base in the Zeta Expanse became a hub of scientific and social experimentation, with Dr. Ward and Dr. Lilia overseeing the medical aspects of the program. Weeks passed and Operation Starbirth began to yield results. The first wave of hybrid pregnancies progressed rapidly, each fetus displaying unique combinations of traits. The resistance buzzed with cautious optimism. However, their progress did not go unnoticed. Deep within the Imperial ranks, a mole transmitted encrypted data about Operation Starbirth to Emperor Zorn's inner circle. Zorn's reaction was swift and furious. "This abomination cannot be allowed to continue," he raged to his advisors. "Dr. Zarlox!" The draconian scientist stepped forward, his eyes glinting with malevolent curiosity. "Yes, my Emperor." "Accelerate Project Chimera. I want a bioweapon capable of eradicating these half-breed monstrosities. Sterilization is our goal. Wipe their genetic potential from the galaxy." As Project Chimera ramped up in secret Imperial labs, the Resistance remained unaware of the looming threat. Craig, meanwhile, found himself tapped for a critical mission. "We need to infiltrate the Imperial communications hub on Novus Prime," Admiral Zoran explained, pointing to a holographic map. "Our intelligence suggests they're coordinating a major operation from there. We need to know what it is." Craig nodded, studying the layout of the facility. "I'll lead the team. We'll use the new cloaking tech to slip past their defenses. The mission to Novus Prime was a testament to Craig's enhanced abilities. As they breached the facility's outer perimeter, he felt a new strength coursing through his body, his senses sharper than ever before. Inside the communications hub, Craig's team worked swiftly to download classified files. As he sifted through the data, his blood ran cold. Project Chimera, anti-hybrid bioweapons, a secret facility on Tharok. The pieces fell into place, revealing a nightmarish picture. "We need to get this back to base now," Craig ordered, his voice tense. But as they prepared to extract, alarms blared through the facility. Imperial troops poured in, led by a familiar face, Commander Vex, his eyes burning with vengeance. "Richardson!" Vex roared, opening fire. Craig moved with inhuman speed, dodging energy bolts and returning fire. He covered his team's retreat, his enhanced physiology allowing him to hold off an entire squad single-handedly. As they made their escape, a bolt from a strange new weapon caught Craig in the side. Pain exploded through his body, and he felt his muscles seize up. Gritting his teeth, he pushed through the agony, piloting their shuttle out of Novus Prime's atmosphere with sheer willpower. Back at the Resistance base, Craig's team was met with a mix of celebration and concern. The intel they'd gathered was invaluable, but the news of Project Chimera cast a pall over recent successes. As Dr. Ward treated Craig's wound, she shared some surprising news. "The weapon was designed to target hybrid physiology," she explained. "The fact that it affected you suggests your DNA has undergone significant changes due to your exposure to Pryler's genetic material." Admiral Zoran called an emergency meeting of Resistance leadership. The mood was tense as he outlined their options. "We have two priorities," he stated firmly. "First, a strike on the Tharok facility to destroy Zarlox's research. Second, a massive information campaign to expose the Empire's unethical experiments to the galactic public." As the Resistance mobilized for these crucial operations, Craig and Pryler faced a personal dilemma. Dr. Ward had just informed them that due to the accelerated development, their child would be born much sooner than expected. "We need to decide," Pryler said softly, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Do we stay here where it's safe, or do we join the mission to Tharok?" Craig looked at his partner, then at the bustling command center around them. The fate of their child, the other hybrid babies, and perhaps the entire galaxy hung in the balance. Whatever they decided, he knew their lives would never be the same. The same. Craig met Pryler's gaze, seeing the determination in her eyes that matched his own. "We can't stay behind," Craig said softly. "Our child's future depends on the success of this mission." Pryler nodded, her hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. "I agree. We've come too far to back down now." Their decision made, they turned to leave the medical bay when a frantic commotion erupted in the corridor outside. Captain Marcus Steele burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Admiral Zoran, we've got a situation," Steele announced, barely catching his breath. "The Star Drifter intercepted an Imperial freighter. You're not going to believe what we found." Admiral Zoran's scales rippled with interest. "Go on, Captain." "Prototype samples of Dr. Zarlox's anti-hybrid bioweapon," Steele said, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. "We've secured them and brought them back for analysis." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Craig felt a chill run down his spine, his hand instinctively reaching for Pryler's. Admiral Zoran's expression hardened. "This changes everything. Dr. Ward, Dr. Lilia, I need you to analyze those samples immediately. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Craig paced the corridors of the base, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. When Dr. Ward finally emerged from the lab, her face was grave. "It's worse than we thought," she said, gesturing for Craig and the others to follow her into the lab. "The bioweapon targets a specific protein sequence in hybrid DNA. It would render all hybrids sterile and gradually break down their enhanced abilities." Dr. Lilia continued, her multiple eyes blinking in rapid succession. "If deployed, it could affect not only our children, but any future human-alien offspring across the galaxy." The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Craig looked at Pryler, then at Admiral Zoran. He knew what he had to do. I'll lead the strike team to Tharok, Craig said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his gut. My experience with Imperial tech and my hybrid abilities give us the best chance of success. Pryler opened her mouth to protest, but Craig gently placed a hand on her arm. I know it's not ideal, but you need to stay here where it's safe. Our child needs you. Tears welled in Pryler's eyes, but she nodded, understanding the necessity of his decision. As preparations for the Tharok mission ramped up, an unexpected crisis erupted within the base. Alarms blared, and security personnel rushed through the corridors. Craig sprinted to the command center, where he found Admiral Zoran barking orders. We have a situation, Zoran said as Craig entered. A group of purist aliens led by a Zentorian named Krovax is attempting to seize control of the base. They want to terminate Operation Starbirth. Craig's enhanced hearing picked up the sounds of struggle echoing through the base. I'll handle this, he said, already moving towards the door. The next few minutes were a chaotic blur of action. Craig moved through the base with inhuman speed and agility, disarming purist insurgents and protecting loyalist resistance members. His hybrid physiology allowed him to anticipate and counter attacks with uncanny precision. Finally, he came face to face with Krovax, the Zentorian leader. The alien towered over Craig, his four arms rippling with muscle. You're an abomination, Krovax snarled. Your very existence threatens the purity of our species. Craig didn't waste breath on a response. He launched himself at Krovax, using his smaller size and greater agility to his advantage. The fight was intense, a blur of limbs and grappling holds. Craig felt his enhanced strength surge through him as he countered Krovax's attacks. In a final, decisive move, Craig managed to pin Krovax to the ground. But as he subdued the Zentorian, he noticed a small device in one of Krovax's hands, its light blinking ominously. What did you do? Craig demanded, tightening his hold. Krovax merely smiled, a cold and satisfied expression. The message is sent, you've already lost. Before Craig could press further, security teams arrived to take Krovax into custody. As they led the Zentorian away, Admiral Zoran approached Craig. We need to move up our timeline, Zoran said, his scales shifting colors rapidly. That message Krovax sent? We can't be sure who received it, but we can't take any chances. The Tharok mission launches in 2 hours. Craig nodded, the adrenaline of the fight still coursing through his veins. He made his way to the hangar bay, where a specially modified stealth ship waited. His team, a mix of hybrid and alien operatives, was already on board. As Craig prepared to board, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Pryler, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and fear. Come back to us, she said softly, placing Craig's hand on her swollen belly. Both of us. Craig leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. I promise, he whispered. With a final look back, Craig boarded the ship. As the hangar bay doors opened, revealing the star-studded expanse of space, he felt the weight of his mission settle upon him. The fate of hybrid beings across the galaxy rested on the success of this operation. The stealth ship glided silently out of the hangar, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Imperial sensors. As they set course for Tharok, Craig briefed his team on the mission parameters, emphasizing the need for speed and precision. As they approached the volcanic moon of Tharok, the ship's sensors lit up with activity. Craig leaned forward, studying the readouts with growing concern. The Imperial presence is much stronger than we anticipated, he muttered, his mind racing to adapt their plan. They've bolstered the facility's defenses significantly. One of his team members, a lithe Arcturian named Zilvan, spoke up. This suggests Dr. Zarlox's research has progressed further than we thought. We may be running out of time. Craig nodded grimly. Then we'll just have to be better, faster, and smarter than they expect. Prepare for insertion. We're going in hot. Craig's team infiltrated the facility on Tharok with practiced efficiency, their movements silent and purposeful. As they penetrated deeper into the complex, the signs of increased Imperial activity became unmistakable. Enhanced security protocols, additional guard patrols, and newly installed defense systems all pointed to a facility on high alert. Zextor, Craig called softly, motioning his Silurian second-in-command closer. "We need to split up. The bioweapon research is our primary target, but there's too much at stake here to ignore the other aspects of this operation." Zextor's scaled brow furrowed. "What are you proposing, sir?" Craig's eyes scanned the corridor ahead, his enhanced senses picking up the faintest traces of movement and sound. "You'll lead the team to destroy the bioweapon research. I'll focus on freeing the hybrid test subjects and gathering intel. We can't leave them here, and any information we can gather might be crucial for protecting our people in the future." For a moment, Zextor looked like he might object, but then he nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Understood, sir. We'll rendezvous at the extraction point in 30 minutes. As the team divided, Craig made his way towards the containment area, his movements a fluid blend of stealth and speed. He encountered minimal resistance, disabling the few guards he came across with swift, non-lethal strikes. The containment area was a stark, clinical space filled with rows of stasis pods. Craig's breath caught in his throat as he saw the occupants, hybrid beings in various stages of development, their features a blend of human and alien characteristics. He quickly got to work, fingers flying over control panels as he initiated the release sequence for the pods. As the first of the hybrids began to stir, a commotion from the far end of the room caught Craig's attention. Dr. Zarlok stood at a central console, his long fingers dancing across the controls. The Vexillian scientist's eyes widened in surprise as he spotted Craig. "You're too late, human," Zarlok hissed, his voice filled with cold persistence. "I will not allow my life's work to fall into your hands." Craig lunged forward, but not before Zarlok activated a sequence on the console. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and Craig's enhanced hearing picked up the distinct sound of explosives being armed. "What have you done?" Craig demanded, closing the distance between them. Zarlok's lips curled into a sneer. "Initiated a fail-safe protocol. This facility and all evidence of Project Chimera will be reduced to ash." Craig didn't waste time with words. He launched himself at Zarlok's, their bodies colliding and sending them both crashing into a nearby workstation. The fight was brutal and swift, carrying them through the lab amidst shattering equipment and spilling chemicals. They grappled past tables laden with experimental devices, narrowly avoiding containers holding partially developed hybrid embryos. Craig's enhanced strength gave him an edge, but Zarlok fought with the desperate ferocity of a cornered animal. Finally, Craig managed to pin Zarlok against a wall, his forearm pressed against the scientist's throat. "Deactivate the failsafe," Craig growled. Zarlok's eyes darted to a small, crystalline object on a nearby counter. Craig followed his gaze, realizing it was a data crystal, likely containing the full scope of Project Chimera. In that moment of distraction, Zarlok struck, driving a knee into Craig's midsection. Craig stumbled back, but quickly recovered, delivering a precise strike that left Zarlok unconscious on the floor. With the immediate threat neutralized, Craig grabbed the data crystal and rushed back to the stasis pods. The released hybrids were now fully awake, their expressions a mix of confusion and fear. "We need to move," Craig urged, helping a disoriented hybrid to his feet. "This entire facility is about to blow." As if on cue, a distant explosion rocked the complex. Craig's comlink crackled to life with Zextor's voice. "Sir, we've destroyed the bioweapon production area, but we're cut off from the extraction point. The lower levels are becoming unstable." Craig led the group of hybrids towards the exit, his mind racing. "Find an alternate route. We'll meet you at the secondary extraction point in the main hangar." They navigated through corridors filling with smoke, the sound of collapsing structures echoing around them. Craig's enhanced senses allowed him to guide the group safely, avoiding areas where the destruction was most severe. As they entered a large hangar bay, Craig's hopes for an easy escape were dashed. Commander Vex stood at the far end, flanked by a squad of elite Imperial troops. "Richardson!" Vex snarled, his voice filled with hatred. "I should have known you'd be behind this." Craig pushed the hybrids behind him, assessing the situation. The Imperial troops were well armed and positioned for maximum coverage of the hangar. But Craig had surprise on his side. Vex couldn't know about the full extent of his hybrid abilities. "Stay close," Craig murmured to the hybrids. "When I give the signal, make for that shuttle." He indicated an Imperial craft at the far side of the hangar. Without warning, Craig sprang into action. He moved with blinding speed, closing the distance to the Imperial troops before they could react. The hybrids, following his lead, used their own enhanced abilities to evade enemy fire and create chaos in the ranks. The battle was intense but brief. Craig's superhuman reflexes and strength, combined with the unexpected assistance from the hybrids, quickly turned the tide. Vex, realizing the fight was lost, attempted to retreat, but Craig intercepted him, delivering a knockout blow. "Everyone on the shuttle now!" Craig shouted, racing to the craft's controls. He began the launch sequence as the last of the hybrids scrambled aboard. As the shuttle lifted off, Craig's comlink crackled again. "Sir, we've made it to the hangar," Zextor reported, his voice strained. "I see you," Craig replied, maneuvering the shuttle towards a maintenance tunnel where Zexator's team had emerged. "Get ready to board, fast." The team piled into the shuttle just as another series of explosions rocked the facility. Craig piloted the craft out of the hangar, narrowly avoiding debris as the structure began to collapse. As they cleared Tharok's atmosphere, Craig allowed himself a moment of relief. But that relief was short-lived as he noticed the Imperial fleet dropping out of hyperspace ahead of them. "Hang on," he warned his passengers, pushing the shuttle's engines to their limits. "This is going to get rough." As Craig executed a series of evasive maneuvers, weaving through the encroaching Imperial ships, his eyes fell on one of the hybrid test subjects. The young man's features were eerily familiar, a face Craig recognized from his own mirror. Before he could process this shocking revelation, his comlink chimed with an incoming transmission from the Resistance base. Dr. Ward's voice came through, filled with a mix of joy and urgency. "Craig, Pryler's given birth. It's a boy, Xylar. But we're evacuating the base. Imperial forces are closing in. We need to know your status." Craig's heart swelled with joy at the news of his son's birth, but the gravity of their situation quickly reasserted itself. The shuttle shuddered as it took a glancing hit from an Imperial fighter. "We're on our way," Craig responded, his voice tight with concentration as he piloted through the storm of enemy fire. "But we're in a stolen Imperial shuttle with damage to our systems. We won't make it to the base before evacuation." As alarms blared, warning of multiple system failures, Craig faced an impossible choice. Attempt to reach Pryler and their newborn son, risking the lives of everyone aboard, or find a safe haven for the hybrid test subjects and the invaluable data they'd recovered. The weight of the decision pressed down on Craig as he guided the damaged shuttle through space, Imperial forces in hot pursuit. The fate of his family, the Resistance, and the future of human-alien relations hung in the balance. Whatever he decided, Craig knew that the consequences would reshape the course of the conflict, and his life forever. Forever. Time seemed to slow as Craig's mind raced through his options, each one more impossible than the last. The shuttle shuddered again, another hit from an Imperial fighter sending sparks cascading from a nearby control panel. In that moment of crisis, Craig made his decision. He couldn't risk the lives of everyone aboard, nor could he abandon the invaluable data and the freed hybrid subjects. With a heavy heart, he opened a channel to the Resistance base. "Captain Steele, this is Richardson. I need you to ensure Pryler and Xylar's immediate evacuation. Can you confirm?" There was a burst of static before Steele's voice came through, tense but steady. "Confirmed, Richardson. We're moving them to a secure transport now. What's your status?" Craig's hands flew over the controls, executing a series of evasive maneuvers as he spoke. "We're in a stolen Imperial shuttle. Systems failing. We can't make it to the base. I'm diverting to Omega-7 for emergency docking." "Understood," Steele replied. "We'll maintain calm silence unless absolutely necessary. Good luck, Richardson." The communication cut off, leaving Craig alone with the weight of his decision. He turned to address the group, his eyes lingering for a moment on his clone among the rescued hybrids. "Change of plans," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're heading to Omega-7. It's a neutral space station, our best shot at temporary sanctuary." As they approached the sprawling structure of Omega-7, Craig activated the shuttle's comm system once more. "Omega-7 Control, this is Imperial Research Vessel Theta 9. We've sustained heavy damage and request emergency docking clearance. There was a pause that felt like an eternity before a gruff voice responded. Theta 9, transmit your clearance codes. Craig's fingers danced across the console, inputting a series of codes he'd memorized during his time in the diplomatic corps. He held his breath, hoping the old codes hadn't been changed or flagged. Clearance granted, Theta 9, proceed to docking bay 17. As Craig guided the battered shuttle into the docking bay, he could already see the diverse crowd of aliens and humans moving about the station's bustling corridors. Everyone, listen carefully, he said, turning to the group. We need to blend in as soon as we disembark. Move quickly, but don't run. Act like you belong here. The moment the shuttle's ramp lowered, Craig led the group into the station's crowded main concourse. The air was thick with the sense of exotic foods and the buzz of 100 different languages. Craig's enhanced senses picked up the telltale signs of Imperial search parties already beginning to comb through the station. This way, he muttered, guiding the group towards a grimy stairwell leading to the station's lower levels. As they descended, the polished surfaces of the main concourse gave way to rusted metal and flickering lights. Craig led them through a maze of narrow corridors until they reached a nondescript door. He knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. The door slid open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with holographic displays and data terminals. A tall, willowy figure emerged from the shadows, its iridescent skin shimmering in the low light. Craig Richardson, the Zygonian said, its voice a melodious whisper. I hope never to see you again. Nice to see you too, Zeltra, Craig replied, a hint of a smile playing at his lips despite the gravity of the situation. I need your help. Zeltura's multifaceted eyes scanned the group behind Craig, lingering on the clone. Fascinating, it murmured. You've brought me quite the prize, haven't you? Craig stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. I need shelter for these people and a way off this station. In exchange, I can offer you information that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The Zygonian's antennae twitched with interest. Show me? Craig produced the data crystal, its surface glinting in the room's dim light. Zeltura's long fingers reached out, hovering over the crystal without touching it. Very well, Zeltura said after a moment. I will provide sanctuary and arrange transport, but I want a copy of that data. As Craig negotiated the details with Zeltura, the station's public address system crackled to life. A familiar voice filled the air, sending a chill down Craig's spine. Attention, citizens of Omega-7. This is Commander Vex of the Galactic Empire. We are conducting a search for dangerous fugitives. Your cooperation is mandatory. Craig's clone stepped forward, his expression mirroring Craig's own persistence. They'll be searching methodically, starting from the upper levels, he said, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. Craig nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. Zeltura, how quickly can you get them off the station? The Zygonian's fingers danced over a nearby console. I can have a ship ready in 2 hours. But with the Imperial lockdown, getting to the docking bay will be challenging. Then we'll give them something else to chase, Craig said, his eyes meeting those of his clone. I'll draw their attention while you lead the others to the rendezvous point. The clone hesitated for a moment before nodding. It's the logical choice. I have your memories, your training. I can get them to safety. As Craig prepared to leave, Zeltura handed him a small comm device. This will allow you to monitor Imperial communications. Use it wisely. With a final look at the group of hybrids he'd fought so hard to save, Craig slipped out into the corridor. He made his way back to the main concourse, purposely allowing himself to be glimpsed by Imperial patrols. There! It's Richardson! The shout echoed through the crowded space, followed by the sound of armored boots pounding against metal flooring. Craig took off, his enhanced speed and agility allowing him to stay just ahead of his pursuers. He weaved through the startled crowd, leaping over barricades and sliding under closing security doors. As he ran, Craig activated the comm device, listening to the frantic chatter of Imperial forces. He smiled grimly, realizing that every Imperial soldier chasing him was one less searching for the other hybrids. The chase led him higher and higher through the station's levels, until he found himself in Omega-7's central plaza. The vast domed space was filled with a panicked crowd, Imperial soldiers shoving their way through in pursuit. Craig's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. But as he turned to run, he found himself face to face with Commander Vex, the Imperial officer's eyes blazing with hatred. "End of the line, Richardson," Vex snarled, raising his weapon. Before Craig could react, the station rocked with a series of explosions. Alarms blared as the lighting flickered, plunging the plaza into momentary darkness. When emergency lighting flickered on, Craig saw Imperial soldiers falling back, under a barrage of fire from the far side of the plaza. A familiar voice crackled over his comm device. "Richardson, this is Steele. Extraction team is in position. Get to docking bay 42 now." Craig didn't need to be told twice. He charged towards the sound of friendly fire, his fists and feet lashing out at any Imperial soldier who got in his way. As he fought, he caught glimpses of resistance fighters pushing back the Imperial forces, creating a path for his escape. He was nearly to the docking bay when his comm device chimed with an incoming transmission. It was his clone. "We're away," the clone's voice came through, breathless but triumphant. "Zeltura's contact got us on a transport to Nebulon 5. We're safe." Relief flooded through Craig as he sprinted the final distance to the waiting resistance ship. As the ramp closed behind him and the ship rocketed away from Omega 7, Craig allowed himself a moment to breathe. Captain Steele approached, his face grim but his eyes showing a glimmer of hope. "We've got a lot to talk about, Richardson. But first, there's someone who wants to see you." Steele led Craig to the ship's small medical bay. There, cradling a tiny bundle in her arms, was Prylar. Her eyes, filled with tears of joy and relief, met Craig's as she held out their son. As Craig took Xylar in his arms, feeling the weight of his newborn son and the data crystal that could change everything, he knew that their journey was far from finished. The true challenge, reshaping the future of the galaxy, was just beginning. Craig looked down at his son, marveling at the perfect blend of human and alien features. Xylar's eyes, a swirling mix of blue and violet, gazed up at him with innocent wonder. The moment of peace was shattered by a sudden lurch of the ship. Captain Steele's voice crackled over the intercom. "All hands, brace for emergency jump to hyperspace." Craig instinctively curled his body around Xylar, shielding the newborn as the ship's engines roared to life. The stars outside the viewport stretched into streaks of light, and the resistance vessel plunged into the swirling vortex of hyperspace. As the ship stabilized, Craig gently handed Xylar back to Prylar. "What's going on, Steele?" he asked, activating his comm link. "We've received an urgent transmission from Nebulon 5, Steele replied, his voice tight with tension. "Imperial forces have tracked down your clone and the other hybrids. They've begun orbital bombardment of the planet." Craig's heart sank. He had hoped that Zeltura's contacts would keep the group hidden long enough for the resistance to regroup. Now, it seemed that nowhere in the galaxy was truly safe for hybrids. As the ship emerged from hyperspace at the secret rendezvous point, Craig's mind raced. The Resistance's resources were dwindling, and the Empire's reach seemed to extend farther with each passing day. They needed a decisive victory, something to turn the tide of public opinion and end the conflict once and for all. An idea began to form in Craig's mind, a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. He turned to Prylar, who recognized the look in his eyes. "You have a plan," she stated, her alien features set in a determined expression. Craig nodded. "It's risky, but it might be our only chance. We need to hit them where they least expect it, right at the heart of the Empire." He quickly outlined his plan to Captain Steele and Admiral Zoran. The Resistance would use its remaining resources to stage a daring infiltration of the Imperial capital world, Xenon Prime. Once there, they would broadcast the truth about Project Chimera to the entire galaxy. Admiral Zoran's hologram flickered as he considered the proposal. "It's a suicide mission, Richardson," he said gravely. "But at this point, I don't see any other option. You have my authorization. Assemble your team." Over the next few hours, Craig put together a diverse group of humans, aliens, and hybrids for the operation. His clone, who had managed to escape Nebulon 5 with a handful of others, joined them at the rendezvous point. As their ship approached Xenon Prime, Craig briefed the team on their infiltration strategy. They would use a combination of advanced cloaking technology and Craig's intimate knowledge of Imperial protocols to slip past the planet's formidable defenses. The tension in the air was palpable as their cloaked vessel glided silently through Xenon Prime's upper atmosphere. Craig stood at the helm, guiding the ship through a complex series of maneuvers to avoid detection. "We're approaching the drop zone," he announced, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Remember, once we're on the ground, we move fast and quiet. Our target is the Imperial Galactic Broadcasting Center." The team deployed from the ship, using personal cloaking devices to avoid the patrolling Imperial guards. Craig led them through the sprawling capital city, its towering spires and gleaming walkways, a testament to the Empire's power and wealth. As they neared the broadcasting center, Craig split the team into two groups. His clone would lead a diversion team to draw away the main security forces, while Craig, Pryler, and a small infiltration team would make their way to the main transmission hub. The sound of blaster fire erupted from the far side of the building as the diversion team engaged the Imperial guards. Craig used the distraction to lead his group through a maintenance access point, bypassing the main security checkpoints. They fought their way through the building's lower levels, their hybrid abilities giving them an edge against the surprised Imperial forces. Craig's enhanced strength and agility allowed him to disarm opponents with ease, while Pryler's psionic abilities confused and disorientated entire squads of soldiers. As they reached the central transmission hub, Craig's comlink crackled to life. It was his clone, his voice strained with effort. "We've drawn off most of the security forces, but they're calling in reinforcements. You don't have much time." Craig acknowledged the warning as he and Pryler worked to override the hub's security protocols. Just as they prepared to insert the data crystal containing the damning evidence against the Empire, the doors to the hub slid open. Emperor Zorn himself stood in the doorway, flanked by Dr. Zarlox and a squad of elite guards. The Emperor's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him. "So," Zorn said, his voice dripping with contempt, "the abomination and his alien whore have come to challenge me in my own stronghold." Craig's muscles tensed, ready for action. "It's over, Zorn," he declared. "The truth about your experiments, about the potential of hybrids, it's all going to come out today." The Emperor's response was a snarl of rage as he signaled his guards to attack. The hub erupted into chaos as Craig and Pryler fought back-to-back against the Imperial forces. Dr. Zarlox, seeing an opportunity, lunged for the data crystal. But before he could reach it, Craig's clone burst into the room, tackling the scientist to the ground. "Finish it!" the clone shouted to Craig, grappling with Zarlox. Craig dodged a blast from the Emperor's personal weapon and closed the distance between them. His fist connected with Zorn's jaw, sending the tyrant stumbling backward. Pryler, her hands a blur over the transmission controls, called out, "It's ready. We just need to activate the broadcast." Craig pinned the Emperor against the control panel, his enhanced strength allowing him to restrain the struggling monarch. "Do it!" he yelled to Pryler. As Pryler's finger hovered over the broadcast initiation button, the room fell into a moment of tense silence. The future of the cosmos hung in the balance, waiting for a single touch to tip the scales.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.